I want to welcome all of you to tonight's Rosenmeier Forum. The Gordon Rosenmeier Center for State and Local Government honors the legacy of Gordon Rosenmeier, who represented Morrison counties and Crow Wing counties in the Minnesota Senate for 30 years from 1941 to 1971. Gordon Rosenmeier was a principled conservative who went on to become the single most powerful and influential legislator in all of Minnesota history. Rosenmeier was a most visionary leader in the Minnesota legislature, and in 1967 authored the first pollution control agency of any state in the nation. He also authored the Minnesota Community College system, which has served our state so well. Tonight's Rosenmeier Forum speaker is indeed a respected, hardworking legislator who successfully authored the historic restoration of the Minnesota State Capitol, which is Minnesota's #1 public building. Representative Dean Urdahl, who comes from rural Litchfield, Minnesota, has served in the Minnesota House of Representatives for 20 years. Representative Urdahl successfully authored the landmark legislation to establish a Capitol Preservation Commission to guide the physical aspects which took place in our Capitol nearly a decade ago. Throughout the 1980s, 1990s, and into the 21st century, Minnesota's beautiful state capitol was literally falling apart. Urdahl's historic restoration project authorized the expenditure of $310 million for a restored state capitol that had cost just $4.5 million to build, and which was appropriated by the 1895 legislature, and it took them 8 years to complete the construction. It was completed in time for its first session of the Minnesota legislature in 1905. The $310 million expenditure was, in my view, a wise investment which will serve future generations of Minnesotans for the next several hundred years. Representative Urdahl is a teacher of American history by occupation and background, and is considered an expert on U.S. Civil War history. He is an author of several books, several of which are in our own CLC library. One of them is about the Minnesota Twins baseball team, and the other is on the U.S. Sioux Indian War of 1862, a book he authored entitled Uprising, from which a Hollywood motion picture is now being produced. It has also been my privilege to have known Representative Urdahl for 50 years. He and I were friends and students together at St. Cloud State University in the good old days of the late 1960s and early 1970s. Dean and his wife Karen reside in rural Litchfield, and Dean is seeking one more term in the Minnesota House of Representatives. One little side note I want to mention is that Representative Urdahl also had the privilege of meeting Gordon Rosenmeier on several occasions in his last campaign for the legislature in 1970. Without further ado, it is my privilege to introduce to you tonight an excellent and most dedicated public servant in Minnesota, Representative Dean Urdahl.
Well, thank you. Very great to be here tonight. A couple of corrections there. When you mentioned the last campaign, it was Gordon Rosenmeier's, not mine. I was working with Congressman John Zwock in the 1970 campaign. I was still a college student, and I remember coming up here and going to events for John Zwock and meeting Senator Rosenmeier. So with that, I am honored and pleased to be here tonight. My brief commercial message here. I've written 9 published books. Most of them are on the U.S.-Dakota War or the U.S. Civil War. And we've started turning my books into movies. Now, I wish it were Hollywood, Steve, but it's a low budget, a private film that we made. And you could see Uprising it's on streaming right now on Xumo, Xumo. Go to Xumo, click in Uprising and you can find it. And as happenstance, just today, the parallel movie that we made to Uprising, Assault on Fort Ridgely, was sent to the distributor, so that'll be streamed within the next month or two. So just a little sideline to keep me out of trouble. But enjoyed meeting Steve a long time ago. I knew him when he was just a kid. And at St. Cloud State. Actually, I got there about the time that he was leaving, but we crossed paths there. It was a pleasure for me to serve with other members of this area in the legislature. Greg Blaine was a member when I got there. I served with him a couple terms. John Ward literally sat across the aisle from me, both politically and physically. And I would give John advice all the time. And who knows, if he had taken it, he might have lasted longer. But he still is a good friend of mine, as is Josh Heinzman, your current representative, who serves you well as well. So with that, let's get into the topic here today. When I first was elected, my first 2003 is when I was sworn in January of that year. And my gosh, that Capitol, since I was a young boy, I was, in awe of our state capitol. I can remember driving on the freeway at night, well, not when I was a young kid, but later on with my kids, and looking at that building lit up at night. And I would say to my three boys, Al Quee works there, because they knew Al Quee at that time. And so we really were in awe and admiration of the state capitol. And then I got elected, and I'm there, and I'm walking in, and it didn't take a real long time to realize that there's something wrong here. It still looks great from a distance, but you get up close and there are cracks in the wall. And the ceiling, the dome is leaking, and those beautiful murals are being stained. And if you get a good rain, the tunnel floods. And the paint is chipping on the windows. The windows are, some of the wood is rotting. There were things wrong. And these were only the things that you could see. There are other things behind those walls, like the wiring and the plumbing, that also were in need of repair. And I'll get into more detail as we go through this. But once I realized that it wasn't as great as it looked, as it had been, I began asking, well, why aren't we doing things about this? Well, they'd been trying. There had been efforts to fix the Capitol, beginning in the 1970s. But for one reason or another, an agreement on what to do and how to do it wasn't being reached. And this wasn't so much a political party thing, not so much Republicans versus Democrats on what to do. It came down to turf wars. You see, in the beginning, I'll mention this in my slides, but in the beginning, the way the Capitol was built, if you were a representative, if you were a senator, your office was your chamber desk. Well, over time, that just didn't work anymore. And so, in the 70s, they moved the House of Representatives offices, most of them, across the street to the state office building. That's another story I might have time for at the end. But the House members over there, and what did the Senate do? They basically took over the Capitol and the public spaces for their offices. That wasn't the intent of Cass Gilbert, the architect, but that's what happened. So the public spaces are taken over as to become Senate offices, and now when the repairs had to be made and the movement grew to return the public to the public spaces that were now offices, the Senate didn't want to move. And so the problem, again, wasn't so much between Republicans and Democrats as the Senate and the House. And a plan was developed to dig out under the steps leading up to the Capitol. I mean, you all know there's this big, huge stairway from the mall to the Capitol building. They wanted to dig out under it and make Senate offices. That didn't work either. So there had to be some things happening to make this restoration possible, and that's what I'm going to go over with you tonight. And I'm going to talk about the history, how this Capitol came to be, its forerunners, and then get into some of the problems. So let's see how this works. There we go. I'll read along with you guys. You don't have to read, I can read to you. The first state capitol was located at 10th and Cedar Streets in St. Paul. It had been built in 1853 and served as the territorial capital, then the state capital. The building was brick and symmetrical with a small dome in the center and 4 columns that reached 2 stories over the entrance. Twice remodeled in the 1870s, it burned down in 1881. In 1857, the territorial legislature had passed a bill to move the capital to St. Peter. The bill had to be enrolled, means copied, before it could be signed by the governor. The St. Paul loyalist, Representative Jolly Joe Roulette, chair of the enrollment committee, made off with the bill and hid in a hotel attic where he played cards. After 8 days of not being able to find Joe Roulette or any decks of cards, the legislature adjourned without a bill being signed. And so they had to keep it in St. Paul. In later years, there were other attempts to move the capital. 5 attempts to move it to Candioi County. All of them failed, and then there was another attempt to move it to St. Peter, which also failed, and it, of course, remains in St. Paul. And there is Jolly Joe Roulette. Oops. Whoa, where'd that go? Okay. That circled area up there, that is the site of the original state capitol. Uh-oh. What am I doing? What is that? All right, back one. I believe this is the original state capitol. Now, the Buffington Folly. Remember, that building burned down in 1881, so now you got to have a new state capitol. By 1883, the St. Paul architect Leroy Buffington had completed Minnesota's second state capitol on the same site as the first one. It was a 4-story building made of pressed red brick from Red Wing. A tall tower rose from its center to call attention to the building, but almost from the beginning, people complained that it was overcrowded and utterly unfit for human beings to breathe. And so within 10 years, there was a demand for another new state capitol. Now, here is the Buffington Capitol. the second one. This is the one that you can't breathe in. Okay, during the 1893 legislative session, an expenditure of $2 million was approved for the construction of a new state house. A state board of commissioners was established to oversee the project. 11 commissioners were appointed, including one from each of the 7 congressional districts. The first order of business was a site, and a hill off University Avenue was selected. Next was the selection of an architect. 56 applied. In the end, Cass Gilbert of St. Paul was chosen, but only after his request for an increased stipend and control of the project were agreed to. And here is Cass Gilbert, architect of our state capitol, and in his lifetime, one of the greatest architects in the entire country. This is the groundbreaking of the new capitol in 1896. Now, many of these workers were Civil War veterans or their descendants. And what Cass Gilbert did was build a building with that in mind. In some ways, our state capitol is a memorial to the Civil War veterans and those who built it. This is his drawing early on of the state capitol. Now, the vision of Cass Gilbert. Demand grew for a building that announced to the country that Minnesota was no longer a wilderness outpost. They called Minnesota the Siberia of America. I mean, what if they'd been here today? Hey, my wife and I were in Florida last week. No, coming back from Florida. We actually, the middle 2 weeks in January, we were in Florida. We drove back. There was more snow in northern Alabama than there was when we got here. And same with Nashville. Gilbert's design borrowed elements from the architecture of ancient Greece and Rome, as well as from the Renaissance period in Italy and France. But it was not a copy. There are no buildings in Europe that look exactly like the Minnesota State Capitol, and there's nothing else in Minnesota like it either. It would look old, but it'd be up to date. They had electricity, elevators, telephones, steam heat, fireproofing, and indoor toilets on 2 floors. On the surface, it would have the look of the 16th century Italian Renaissance. July 27th, 1898, the laying of the cornerstone by former Governor Alexander Ramsey, second governor of the state of Minnesota, the governor who presided through the Dakota War of 1862. Now, under construction, July 1st, 1903, there was a debate over the white marble from Georgia and the granite from local quarries. This is kind of contentious. You have St. Cloud area with all the granite, but Cass Gilbert thought it looked ugly. Well, you have Minnesotans saying, you can't bring in marble from Georgia when we've got all this fine building material in Minnesota. And so they went back and forth on that until finally it was decided that the base of the building would be granite from Minnesota, but the white marble would be the showy exterior areas of the Capitol. And so the basement is granite, St. Cloud mostly, and a lot of the rest of it marble. I will say that when we did the restoration, they were able to get white marble from Georgia from the same quarry. Okay, a building unmatched in Europe or America. The more elegant and decorative Renaissance version of the classical architecture came into style. The Renaissance referred to the revival of classic antiquity in art, architecture, and literature, These buildings were more ornate and elegant. Sculptors and artists came to Minnesota to make our capital an elegant showcase in the Renaissance manner. The basic plan, a symmetrical domed building with a central columned porch. Now here's a worker who is carving one of the 12 eagles that surround the base of the dome. The middle dome eagle symbolized democracy, and stars represented the state motto. Karen, say it. Thank you. My wife is a French major. She says it better than I do. Okay. The Depression of the 1890s drove up the cost of wages and materials. State legislators approved another $1 million in 1901. So now we're up to $3 million. The dome proved more problematic to construction, leading to delays. And Gilbert could not meet the January 1903 deadline and asked for more time and more money. $1.5 million more was appropriated. And what's that total then, Steve? 4.5 million. There he's got it, 4.5. And he was a social studies teacher, but he can keep up with this. 1.5 million more was appropriated with an absolute January 1905 deadline. The latest funding was toward creating a first-class interior. So here we have the rotunda, the lower floor of the rotunda with the Star of the North in the glass floor. And the rotunda dome has 4 murals called the Civilization of the Northwest. They represent the ideas of Western migration and the march of civilization. So these are great big mural paintings. If you look up in the ceiling of the dome, there they are. I should have asked this before. How many of you have been to the state capitol? Okay, a lot of you when you're in school. How many of you have been to the state capitol since it was restored? Someone, you gotta come see this. And oh my gosh, there was a controversy. Gilbert said that the idealized human body was believed to be beautiful, uplifting the spirit. Paintings of nude women were not intended to be sexual or unseemly. They were meant to be inspiring and spiritual. There were complaints. Minnesotans said, artists can get away with nudes in Europe, but not in America among proper God-fearing people. Oops, I gotta go back. I wasn't done. Gilbert decided that Minnesotans were open-minded. The new capital, after all, was supposed to represent a Minnesota that was civilized and mature. It's placed on the dome in the rotunda. Now there are 4 murals, 29 feet by 13 feet. Okay, just different examples. The Contemplative Spirit of the East by Kenyon Cox. This is at the top of the staircase leading to the Supreme Court chambers. This is one of a series by Elmer Gamesey, a first floor ceiling decoration. Again, one in a series. I'm not going to show you. We've got 51 murals in the Capitol. 49 of them are affixed and you can't move them. I'm not going to show you every one, but I'm giving you examples of those that were in the series. So this is one of this type. The Gopher State, they're friendly gophers in the second floor ironworks. Winnowing. This is one of 12 allegorical lunettes located in the space below the skylight at the top of each grand staircase. Lunettes like this. The state flower at the top there. Lady slippers are on the middle columns, marble columns on the second floor. On June 14th, 1905, Civil War and Spanish-American War veterans transferred their battle flags from the old Capitol building to the new one. They marched up Cedar Street and were met by Governor John A. Johnson, who accepted the flags. So again, I told you, in part, this building is a memorial to the Civil War, and Civil War veterans carried their flags, their battle flags that had been captured in the war, to the Capitol. And the battle flags carried up the Capitol steps, deposited in 4 bronze and glass cases in the rotunda, and they are there today. Now, there's one flag that isn't, and that was a flag from Alabama that was captured at Gettysburg, and it's in the bowels of the State Historical Society in a case there. Not too many years ago, my wife and I were in Virginia, and we went to the Museum of the Confederacy there, and went upstairs, and this lady's got all these flags all over the place, and she says, and here we have the flag, every battle flag from the Civil War from the state of Virginia. And I took out my phone and put a little picture on it. You don't have that one. They want it, but they're not getting it. All right, 1905. Despite its beautiful surroundings, the Capitol is, first and foremost, a place of business. There were no offices, as I said, for legislators in the beginning. Your floor desk was your office. Also interior, the Ratskeller. For a while, after like World War II especially, the German Ratskeller was kind of left to deteriorate. But restored in 1994, the Americanized German eagles on the ceiling of the cafe. It's open today. Now, here's another painting. This is Father Hennepin at the Falls of St. Anthony. Okay, I'm getting into artwork a little bit now, more. This was in the retiring room of in the governor's reception room. The room where the governor often has press conferences and signs bills into law. And this is what was at the other end of the room. Behind him would be the Traverse de Sioux signing. Governor Dayton objected to these 2 paintings. This was by Douglas Volk, installed in the governor's reception room, and carefully replicated after historical research, but eventually removed to the 3rd floor after restoration of the Capitol, along with Traverse de Sioux. And I'll get now into it some more. This is the Battle of Nashville by Howard Pyle, one of 4 Civil War paintings in the governor's reception room. Okay, so after the restoration, there were concerns about art, what to do, and several of us are sitting around the table in the governor's reception room with Governor Dayton. We're talking about the need to continue the overseeing preservation in the future, doing things so we don't have a situation where we go all this time and let things go, and then finally we've got to do something. So this committee was being set up to do that. And then at the conclusion of it, the governor looks up, and by the way, I got along well with Governor Dayton. He appointed me to the Civil War Sesquicentennial Commission to be the chair of that. Heck, he did a resolution where he even called me up and asked me to contribute to it, dealing with some Indian events. But anyway, in this case, the governor looks up and says, and now those paintings that were in this room, I don't want them returned. I said, why, Governor? Well, they give a bad impression. I have to stand here and sign bills with this treaty behind me, this treaty signing where we stole the Indian land. And we have to look over there at Father Hennepin, and the native people don't like him either. And then we have these on the side. In the room, there are 4 Civil War paintings, 2 on each wall, and then these 2 paintings I've been talking about on either end. And Governor Dayton objected to the violence in these paintings. And another representative said that, well, that blood can scare children. I go, they had video games. You're worried about a painting in the governor's office scaring children? These are historic paintings. They are some of the best in the world of the Civil War. And these are our history. We can't just obliterate our history because we think a painting might be scary. They formed a commission on art, which I was on. And we battled away on capital art. So before I talk about this, the ending was the 2 paintings, Father Hennepin and Traverse de Sioux, went up on the 3rd floor. You can go see them today, but they're not in the governor's room anymore. The 4 Civil War paintings, and these are big paintings. I mean, they're like, 14 by 10 or whatever. They're all there. Plus the 2 in the anteroom. When you come into the governor's office, there's the anteroom where the secretary is, and there are 2 Civil War paintings there. And then if you go into the reception room, there's 4 more. They're still there. We managed to keep those. And some others. Killdeer Mountain, that was in the 3rd floor conference caucus room. I don't know where that one is today. For a while, the attack on New Ulm was in the Hill House, but that I think is now hidden in the Historical Society somewhere. So 2 moved, 2 got lost, and most of the rest of them stayed. But there's controversy with that still to this day. I mean, we've got that painting of Abraham Lincoln behind the speaker's rostrum, and there are those who would like to see him taken out. I'm strongly encouraging that we leave Abraham Lincoln alone. I gave a speech on the House floor explaining some things about who Abraham Lincoln was and his history to Minnesota. But that's a whole different topic. The House Chamber. We have at the top there, Minnesota Spirit of Government by Amerigo Brioschi. It's a painting and a sculpture. That's what whoa. What am I doing? There. I do have an arrow here. There. What I'm talking about is up here. This is a painting and a sculpture. It's a 3D plaster sculpture set against a, painted background. Maybe it was a painted background, I don't know. Open until 1938. In other words, until 1938, that wasn't there. There was seating up there, like there is in the Senate. But in the 30s, time of depression, hardships for farmers, some of them thought that the legislature wasn't doing a good enough job for them, and they dumped garbage on the speaker, which is right here. So they put that there so you couldn't dump garbage on the speaker. And of course, I mentioned the Lincoln painting. The Lincoln painting is right here. And there are those who would like, for whatever reason, to get rid of it. It has to do with Lincoln's relationship to Indian people in the Dakota War of 1862. Yes, he did order the execution of 38, but he also reprieved the death sentences of 265, and the stories of the 38 get pretty complicated, and there were mistakes made. But Lincoln thought he was doing the right thing. But that's another story for another time. Or my third movie, Revenge, which tells the story of the trials. The retirement room, Father Hennepin and, it's the reception room. Father Hennepin, Traverse to Sioux, here's the Father Hennepin where it was. At the other end would have been Traverse to Sioux. They're gone. The spaces today are empty. The 4 Civil War paintings are still there. All right, the Senate chamber, the discoverers and civilizers led to the source of the Mississippi. This also is a controversial painting, and I am very sorry. But try as I might, after like 4 tries, I could not get the colors to transfer properly. So most of this is also supposed to look like this, not like this, but I don't know why that happened. And we have sculptures in the rotunda. Colonel William Colville, Civil War hero who led Minnesota troops at Gettysburg, is there. And there are niches around the second floor rotunda where there are these statues. Now, Cass Gilbert did not like this statue. He was outraged when a woman, Catherine Backus from Minnesota, was chosen in 1909 to do Colville. Gilbert didn't like her work or any other statues in the rotunda. He was a bit of a snob, frankly. Gilbert didn't want non-Minnesota artists dealing with the Capitol artwork, and he certainly didn't want a woman dealing with it. But a woman from Minnesota did the Colville, and he had to accept it. We also have portraits of governors. All of our governors have a portrait along the various walls of the interior of the Capitol. This is Floyd B. Olson. A lot of them then would have something that symbolized what was important to them. Olson was known as a great communicator. Actually, he was almost a presidential candidate. He had a little bit of a dispute with Franklin Delano Roosevelt, but this guy could have run for president. Excellent communicator, that's why the microphone is there, but he died in office. Other governors have something. Arnie Carlson's in a University of Minnesota coat. Quee's got horses in the background. Things that were important to their governors in their lives are depicted in these pictures. And there were those who wanted to do away with them too. I said, no, those are important because, I like walking around the Capitol at night when I'm really getting bored in session and read little histories of the governors are on these pictures, on these murals. And we have statues outside. In 1828, a statue of Knut Nelson, the first Scandinavian elected governor, was placed at the base of the Capitol steps. Governor John A. Johnson had been installed there in 1912. Many other statues and memorials followed. In 1931, 25,000 gathered to support the dedication of a memorial statue of Columbus, which was destroyed in the riots of 2021. As long as they leave Leif Erikson alone. And actually, right now, they're in the middle of working on the state office building, which again, we cost $310 million to fix the Capitol, $750 million to do the state office building, to fix it. Could have built a new one for less. But I digress a little bit. As they're doing the preliminary work on this, and they took out a lot of trees and everything, if you go into the ramp by the state office building and look to your left out there, there's this big box sticking up, covers Leif Erikson. He's still out there. All right, the quadriga, the 4 gold horses. You know, when we're talking about fixing the Capitol and how much it's going to cost, I got a call from somebody once, one of my constituents. What do you need all this money for? Why don't you just sell those 4 horses? Well, we wouldn't get the money. A quadriga is a 4-horse chariot from the ancient world. It is at the base of the dome of the Capitol. The chariot is guided by 2 women who hold the reins. An athletic-looking man triumphantly holds a banner reading Minnesota. The horses signify the powers of nature, air, fire, water, and earth. The women are allegories of industry and agriculture. 10,000 pounds of copper and steel covered in thin sheets of real gold at a cost then of $35,000. Time took its toll, as I said before. By the 1970s and 80s, repairs were necessary. Grime was removed from Senate chamber paintings. Water damage was addressed on other paintings, but this was just the beginning. The issues became critical. Concerns about the condition grew. In the 1970s, I mentioned House members were moved across the street. The renovation discussion began in 1973 when a design competition called for an underground office building. It didn't happen. So what to do? I talked about what the struggle was between the House and Senate. And so, this is what we had going on when we examined the building. Crumbling marble on the outside. All the marble's fallen apart. More crumbled. And eventually, they had to put scaffolding all around the Capitol to keep these pieces from hitting people when they fell off the building. Cracks grew. In the joints and in the surface of the marble. Just pieces falling apart. Barricades lined the Capitol buildings to keep people safe from falling chunks of marble. In 2011, as chair of the Legacy Committee, I included in my bill a provision to create a 22-member Capitol Preservation Commission, the first step in getting something done. Next, we had to get the money. Our consulting architect gave this verdict: if the Capitol were a medical patient, the exterior would be on life support. The mechanical system was in critical condition. The electrical system in serious condition. 1905 designs were not meant to deal with the challenges of today, and a tipping point was being reached. And so more. Water damage to murals and paintings, cracking and peeling windows, leaking roof, floods in the basement. The lunettes We're also, I skipped one there. French doors and window studies revealed this. I mean, wasn't good. And now, behind the walls, things that you don't see. I mean, here are the pipes. We had to do something. The exterior stone had to be cleaned, the joints repointed. I don't know how that happened. By the way, in my first year as a legislator, we had a late night session. Things were really boring. I was never serving when Steve was there. It was always exciting when Steve was there. All right, Steve. We went on a field trip outside, and I actually climbed up and touched the bottom of that. There's a ladder here. You can climb up. And I touched that. I didn't get the top of the ball, just the bottom. Hey, I used to be a house painter. I could do that stuff. So, an estimated $300 million needed. In 2012, a $221 million bill failed by one vote. And I think here, rather than follow that, I'm going to get to the story. I'm going to tell you tonight the story of how the money came about to fix the Capitol. Now, you are getting the backstory. What I'm going to tell you tonight has never been told in a public forum. So, shh, don't tell. You can, Steve. Okay. The People's House. In great disrepair. Something has to be done. Again, I created that committee, the first step. In 2012, Representative Larry Howes was chair of capital investment. In his bill, he had $221 million funded over 4 years to fix the Capitol. Now, let me tell you a little bit about bonding. I've been on bonding for 20 of my 22 years in the legislature. This is capital investment, this is infrastructure, this is taking care of the property that the state of Minnesota owns. I've been chair of the committee, and I've been a minority lead on the committee, which I currently am. And so what's different about bonding is it requires a supermajority to pass a bonding bill. I think I should have turned this telemarketer off. Usually Matt Dean calls me when I'm speaking. But anyway, in bonding, you have to have a supermajority. That means unless you are in the majority, and if you've got 81 Republicans or 81 Democrats, you don't care about the other side because you can pass the bill. But in this case, and in almost every other case, I've never been there when it's been that out of whack, but you have to have, if I'm chair, you got to have some Democrats so you can't pass the bill. Or when the Democrats are in power, if I don't line up the Republican votes, they can't pass a bill. You've got to work together to pass a bonding bill. That's just the way it is. You have to have a supermajority. And so, to pass this $221 million bill, Larry Howes needed 6 Democrat votes. On April 19th, he brought his bill up. So, hopefully he's got those votes. We don't know. Representative Mark Biskins right away objects to this $221 million bill. He says that we should use legacy dollars to pay for that. Legacy, that's the 3/8 of 1 cent that on sales tax that goes into this fund for the arts, history, culture, water, outdoors. Well, it's supposed to be used to supplement other forms of income and not supplant, which is what I said to Biskins on the House floor. I said, you can't use legacy money to pay for things that are supposed to be paid for in other ways. And there's for paintings, I said, I think there's about 30 million you can use, but you can't do this. And he lost in his amendment. Now, DFL bonding lead Alice Hausman complained that we should not do bonding piecemeal. We need a bigger bill, she said. Not 221, we need a bigger bill. And Howes countered, over time, it's fully funded, and this gets us the best price. Now, I spoke next on the House floor. This is April 19th of 2012. I talked about the cost. I gave the architect's medical patient analogy that I just went through with you. I commented that our descendants should know that when faced with the decision to fix the Capitol or not, we refused to let the symbol of Minnesota crumble. I concluded as I held up a fallen chunk of the Capitol, some question the need and timing of this. To them I say, analyze this before another piece of the Capitol tumbles down. And I'm reminded of that one. There it is. That fell off the Capitol. Notice that guy? I don't think he took his eyes off this the whole time. Because he was afraid I was going to drop it. And you know, that thing was heavier than I thought. It weighed about 10 pounds. I'm holding up and I'm talking, and my hand starts to go like this. And he gets more worried. All right. Mary Murphy, DFLer, offered some supporting comments to what I said. Tina Liebling, Representative Tina Liebling, DFLer, complained, this will compete with other projects. I've got projects in Rochester that need attention. Representative Bev Scalzi said, we need to focus on infrastructure only. Melissa Hortman, we're talking about fixing the building we work in every day, and we're saying to our constituents, oh, the things that you care about, the higher education buildings in your community, the transportation infrastructure in your community, we're not doing anything about that. We're going to take care of us, and then we might get to you, but we might adjourn before we have a chance to get to you. That wasn't promising. She's the speaker today. Now, I'm not trying to criticize these people because there's politics here. I'm guessing if they had been in the majority and it was their job to pass this bill, there would have been some different things being said, kind of like flip-flopping the sides. It shouldn't be that way, but sometimes that's what happens. Minority Leader Thiessen commented that all this money couldn't be spent at once, but in a conciliatory tone he said he wanted to work together to get it done. Democrats would provide the needed votes, the 6, if Republicans did their share. Majority Leader Matt Dean summed up, this building doesn't belong to us. We take care of it for a little bit of time. He spoke of the jobs the bill provided about school children in the future, and then we voted. The board lit up 80 yes and 50 no. We were 1 vote short of passage. The board was held open for 5 minutes while the elusive last vote was pleaded for. It never came. One Republican, Mark Biskins, voted no and would not change. On May 7th of that year, 2012, we did have some redemption. A bonding bill with $44 million for capital restoration passed. So, $44 million, not the $221, not the $310 we're going to need in the end, but at least we got a start. Now, we lost, the Republicans, the majority in the 2012 election, and the DFL majority was in charge in 2013. Now, that's not a bonding year. I should have said before. You see, we are elected to a 2-year term. The first year is the budget year. The second year is usually the bonding year. So for us coming up, bonding is the big thing this year. Well, that's the way it's supposed to be. It doesn't always quite happen that way. In 2013, not a bonding year, it was the first year of the biennium, but we had been told that $109 million was critical to the Capitol. Failure would lead to dramatic price increases and put us in a position of never-ending repairs. At our pre-session Republican retreat, a survey was taken of all the Republican members in this retreat, and our priorities were listed. Bonding received 1 vote, mine. It was met with derision. I said, our capital is at a critical point. We have to do $109 million this year. We're going to do a bonding bill. As the Lone Ranger, I determined that I would do what I had to do. I met with Senate Majority Leader Tom Bach. I told him we were at a tipping point, and I asked for his help. Oh, by the way, Bach, you probably all know who I'm talking about. Big guy, former Iron Ranger, carpenter, tall, stocky. He had his own man cave across the hall from the Senate chamber. And I got invited into Tom Bach man cave. Got to sit in there and talk to him about what we needed to do. I said, the Capitol's at a tipping point. I need your help. He assured me, after he asked me, he says, is Ann Rest for this? I said, yes, Senator Ann Rest is for this. Well, then we're going to get it done here, too. He said they're going to get it passed in the Senate, and he would try to help get Speaker Paul Thiessen on board. And so I lobbied individuals. I lobbied the caucus, trying to encourage people to help do this, that $109 million, because we needed it for the Capitol. Now, the chair of the committee that year became a very good friend of mine over the years, was Alice Hausman. In this first year, a budget year, not a bonding year, remember, she's got an $800 million bonding bill, and she needs 8 Republicans to pass it. I go, well, that's too big. I don't think I can get you 8 votes. Now, she thought she was working members to get votes, but Alice wasn't closing the deal. For example, the way things happen, this was right behind me. I'm sitting in the House chamber, and the guy right behind me is Denny McNamara, and Alice comes over and she says, Representative McNamara, you know that trail you want in your district? It's in the bill. And Denny McNamara says, well, thank you, Alice. You see, she didn't say the next words, which were, it's in the bill if you vote for it. Didn't say that. She just made some assumptions. Now, I talked to one of our leadership staff members, Bobby Patrick, about this. I said, it's good that the money for the Capitol is there, but he said the bill's too big. I said, I'll work on that. May 17th, the Capitol bill with $109 million in it was scheduled for a floor vote. I knew it was too big. We didn't have the votes. I get a call from Tina Smith, who worked in the governor's office at that time, and she said, bill scheduled for May 17th, Alice says she has the votes. I say, she doesn't. Don't bring the bill up. Tina says, we'll take her at her word. I said, you shouldn't do that. After session, it was a late night session, and I'm walking down the big wide stairway from the Senate chamber, and I'm the only one walking down, and there's one other person walking up, and that's Alice Hausman. About the middle, we meet, and she says, I'm bringing that bill up tomorrow. It's got the Capitol in it, and we're going to pass it. I said, you don't have the 8 votes. Yes, I do. Well, I said, I hope you do, but I just don't think that's going to happen. So we part. I go back to the state office building where our executive board of the Republican caucus is having a meeting. These are the guys who are so-called in charge of the caucus. And so I think maybe I should go talk to them about this deal with Alice Hausman, what she just told me. So I go into the meeting and I say, okay, guys, I just saw Alice. She says she's got the 8 Republican votes to pass this bill. Does she have those 8 Republican votes? Bobby Patrick says, well, no, not that we're aware of. We don't think that she's got any votes. And I said, well, I didn't think so. So then when this goes down tomorrow, I'll find some ways to put it back together. At which time, a member of the executive board, a very intimidating veteran member, Mary Liz Holberg, says, who do you think you are? You don't have the right to line up anything. It's not promising. I said, Mary Liz, I'm probably the only one in this room who isn't afraid of you. You will not tell me what I can and cannot do. And then I started to walk out of the room, and Bobby Patrick called. He talked to me. I knew what he was doing. So, came up for a vote on May 17th. 3 Republicans voted yes, not 8, and the bill failed 76 to 56. Now, time in session is winding down. The Department of Administration assured us that without the $109 million, work would be largely suspended, the project would be mothballed, and pre-design and design shelved. The prices would rise 3 to 5% a year, and the building would continue to decay. With 3 days left in session, I went to Speaker Thiessen. I asked him, we need to put this bill back together. What do you need in the bill besides the Capitol? And he says, ask Kurt Dowd. He's your minority leader. You have the 8 votes we need. What does he want? So I go to Kurt Dowd. And I say, this is what the Speaker Thiessen said. He wants to know what you want so we can get the bill together. To which Kurt Dowd says to me, what is he asking me for? He's the speaker. He has the majority. They run the place. They should tell me what they've got in the bill. Oh, wait a second. Kind of a circular argument there. That's not going to work. It's not going to get anywhere. So I came up with an idea to break the stalemate. I drafted 3 bills on the Capitol. Here they are. Not thick bills. 1, 2, 3. All of them are for about $140 million. All of them have the Capitol at $109 million, and then we have other things at other amounts. So much for Veterans Home, so much for Clean Water, PFA, different amounts, different categories, but all totaling $140 million and all having the Capitol in there. So what do? I got 3 bills, and the actual bill would have a green piece of paper on top of it. It's called the jacket. So I got 3 green jacketed bills. I sit on the right aisle on the end in the chamber. So I sit here. Across from me then, actually, was John Ward across the aisle. And then it's the Democrat side. The majority leader sits over here. I can't take 3 bills, walk over to the majority leader, and put them on her desk. Both sides are going to wonder what I'm doing. It's not going to end well for me if I do that. So I took those 3 bills, I rolled them up, put them in a Star Tribune, rolled that up, walked over, laid them down on Majority Leader Aaron Murphy's desk and said, here's some good reading. Kurt Dowd says pick one. I fibbed. He never said that. So from that, a bill surfaced. But things aren't settled yet. There's back and forth still, some negotiations. Is there something we can leverage, something we can get for this bill? I don't like leveraging, frankly. Don't think it works. And in this case, I don't think anything happened. But we're going back and forth. And now we're to May 20th. May 20th is the last day. We adjourn at midnight. And this $109 million hasn't passed yet. It's about, I don't know, 7, 8 o'clock at night. Still, no bill agreed to where we can bring it up and vote. Adjournment, remember, is midnight. We have a recess where the caucuses can go off and talk to each other. And as I'm going out with the Republican caucus, Speaker Thiessen says, we're running out of time. Get it done. Well, I'm trying. So I go to caucus, and I walk in. And sitting there, it's in this big caucus room. There's a big table that, I don't know, maybe 30 people sit around. And then there are chairs along the back walls where other people are sitting. I walk in, two of my good friends in the legislature, Denny McNamara and Paul Torkelson, are sitting side by side. Next to them is an empty seat. I'm a little concerned about what might happen here. So I walk in and say, hey, Tork, move one over. I need to sit between you two guys. And I sit down and go, okay, I'm going to try to maintain my cool here. But if something happens, I want you each to reach over and shove me back down. And I'm doing fine. Discussion's pretty positive. And then a freshman member gets up and says, I don't think we need to do this. This is not a bonding year. At that point, I am coming on up. Torkelson puts his hand on this side, McNamara on this side, and they shove me back down, which was good, because we walked out of there, we had support to do the bill, and it passed 120 to 10. Alice wasn't happy. What happened there, when we came out, there had been a dispute over housing. Alice Hausman was a big housing advocate. And she, in this bill being shrunk down from $800 million to $176 million, which is what the final one was, she lost a housing project. And she said to the speaker, you obviously don't need me. And she walked out. Who's vice chair of the committee? John Ward. So your former representative, John Ward, now becomes the presenter of the capital investment bill with $109 million for the capital in it. And I was kind of pleased because John used some of the lines that I'd been using, talking about the tipping point and how critical it was to get this done. And it did pass then, 120 to 10. And so, the Capitol restoration happened, the beautiful building is finished at $310 million. And so, am I going to be arrested or anything?
Not yet. You can keep going a little bit longer.
No, I'm actually, that's it.
Are you ready for questions?
That's how we got the Capitol built. So I gave you the history of the whole thing and told you something that nobody else knows. That I had those 3 bills rolled up in a newspaper, and that's where the bill came from to do the Capitol. All right, questions? Anybody have a question?
Hang on 1 second. We are recording this, so we want to have
When was it finished? When?
2017. I believe it may have been 18, 17 or 18. And by the way, fortunately, the Senate was inconvenienced. Part of the deal here was that the Senate got their own office building. And remember that the whole thing was, what do you do with the Senate? You're going to kick them out of their offices. Where do they go now? They got their own building. But they had to meet over in their new building for a while. The House never had to leave the chamber. There are other inconveniences, but the House chamber never was worked on while the House was in session, whereas the Senate was.
What's the current project now that we're reading about in the paper quite a bit about? Isn't there a $1.2 billion renovation that's going on?
It could wind up that much. It keeps growing. The state office building where the House members have their offices, I mean, it's got some problems. There have been, I mean, my office was water damaged. There was some pipes broke and there's some flooding that would be the second floor of the Capitol, of the state office building. It's built in the 1930s, and it certainly can use some repair. Repairs, I think, are much more extensive than we imagined. It's, last I heard, upwards of $700 million to renovate it. And we have this beautiful, well, as you turn in to where the ramp is in the state office building, to the left with a nice park and trees and everything. Everything has been leveled because they're going to be building that way, and there will be a new mall complex. I'm not talking so much about the mall that comes out of the state capitol, that big green area, but there will be more mall space around the new state office building. And if you're interested in that, the CAP committee, the Capital Area Board, wants your opinions. So the CAP board, CAAB, check that out. But it's a new project.
Isn't it already approved though?
Yes.
The money's already.
Yes, but you know what? It was not brought up for a vote of the legislature to do it.
Can we get the lights turned up just a little bit? Thank you. Any other questions? Got one back?
It was put into some other legislation. Yes.
Hi, I'm just wondering, since the renovation happened before the pandemic, and with working remotely and Zoom and all of those technological changes, have you had to do some other renovations within the Capitol to accommodate that, or are you all?
Nothing major. I can't say no, there wasn't, because I'm not involved in the technology so much. I know that there are things that had to be done to make sure that we all could do Zoom and we all had these capabilities, but it wasn't any major renovation that we had to do. We have some good tech people that managed to get us going.
I got a question for you. What was the most unique or unusual thing that they did, that they made there on that renovation that you found unique and unusual?
Well, the most, not some, just as part of the process, the most unique?
Yeah, of the whole thing.
The most beautiful porta potty I've ever seen. I mean, it had music. It was great. It's kind of weird, but that's...
No, that's good. That's what we wanted.
You mentioned the architect, but what was the name of the construction firm that built it? Who did the actual building of it?
I'm sorry, I don't know.
I believe that was Butler Construction out of St. Paul.
He knows the, what? Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah,
Hang on one second. We got to get that on mic so other people can hear it. Oh, say that again?
Yeah, the state office building was constructed in 1931 at a cost of $1.5 million by the Butler Construction Company, Walter Butler Sr. And his son also was in the business until
so
the
it costs 1.5 million
Million.
to make it and 700 plus million to fix it.
yes. And they're talking, Representative Urdahl, of it costing $1 billion with the interest to be paid on the borrowed money.
Right, well, we thought in the beginning it was going to be around, again, 300 to 400 million, but, I mean, it jumped up almost twice in cost with inflation and prices going up.
Representative Urdahl, did you say that it was not passed as a single bill, but was
Right.
put in as an appropriation, so a lot of members voted for it without knowing it was there?
That could be the case.
That's not,
There was not a specific bill on this.
for an expenditure of that size, that's not right.
Well, that's what we thought.
Way to stir the pot.
We did raise that point.
It was in the text on one of your slides. It specifically said general contractor was the Butler Ryan Company.
See, is that the one that's got the small print that I couldn't read? Yeah, I was kind of sliding off. All right. Anything else?
Looking back in your career, is there anything you regret being a part of or helping with at all?
Anything that I regret? It's a good, very good question. No, I don't. It's hard to come up with specific votes, but sometimes, well, heck, I'll just give you one example. Yeah, there are times when things get very political and you do things that you don't want to do, really. And, well, we were told last session, we're all voting no on the legacy bill. Why? Now, I'm going to be honest here. Not that I haven't been honest before, but more specifically here. My wife and I had been on vacation, and this is over Easter, and we came back like on a Monday. We got back later in the day on Monday, but they'd had session earlier in the day. And in caucus, they had heard that the Democrats might have some trouble because their vice chair or someone had voted no in committee on the legacy bill. So they thought, oh, here's our chance. We can beat them on a bill. And make them look funny because, you know, if you are in charge, you should never lose a vote. And we thought, oh, here's a chance. Well, I wasn't here. I wasn't there for that meeting. I didn't hear that stuff. I used to chair the Legacy Committee. I always vote for legacy. This is something that the people of Minnesota in a recession voted to raise their taxes to do. So we have to collect the money. And no matter if we have a deficit or depression or whatever in the state, that money that is collected via the constitutional amendment has to be distributed. So I get back, and one of the first things I hear as I walk into a room the night I got back, one member comes up and says, you know, we know you want to vote for legacy, but everyone's voting no. We have to have your vote. I didn't want to vote no. I go, why? And he goes into this spiel. I go, well, I was in a little bit of a box because one of the things that you don't do in the legislature is surprise people. They should know what you're going to do, why you're going to do it. I was not able to, in caucus, explain to these members my position and why I thought it was dumb. So I thought, well, it's the first floor vote. It'll come back later. I can vote yes on final passage, so I'll give you a no vote on this. And I did. No good reason. I don't like votes like that. And these are political votes. And the other side does it, we do it, and it's one of the uglier things. You know, I voted against the ag bill because we have to vote against the ag bill. We're all voting no on this one. Geez, I don't like that. And so I try to break away from that. So more probably than you wanted or needed to know on that particular issue, but I'm not unique. We all get faced with things like that, and I hope most of the time we do the right thing. Anything else? You guys are easy. I taught 7th graders for 35 years. You guys were much better.
You want to say thank you?
Representative Urdahl, thank you. You did an outstanding job, and you brought great credit to the Rosenmeier Forum tonight. Let's give him a big hand.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone, for coming.
Yeah, thank you. And remember, sumo, XUMO, uprising, watch the movie.